Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We always love giving this program, so we're very happy to have you all here with us tonight. My name is Eleanor Harris, and the other panelist is my husband and co-director, Bert Harris. So Bert's going to give most of the talk tonight. I'll just give the brief introduction. So there are a couple names I don't recognize on the list of attendees. So welcome virtually to the Clifton Institute. Please come see us in person sometime. We have a beautiful 900-acre property out here in Warrenton that's protected under a conservation easement. It's a really beautiful place, a special place to explore and learn about. And we have lots and lots of stuff going on the property. We have three main kinds of programs. We have education programs, so we do a couple Zoom programs like this every year, but mostly we're out there in person learning about plants and animals and conservation. And we have programs about all sorts of different things all throughout the year. Kids programs, summer camps, adult programs, all sorts of things going on. So come visit us sometime. We also do scientific research, so we're just launching into our summer research season. This summer we'll be studying American kestrels and box turtles and following them as they move across the landscape so that we can try to understand what kind of habitats they use at different times of year so that we can better understand how to manage land to support both of those species. And then we also do habitat restoration. So on our property, we're doing a lot of work to manage our grasslands. We're just wrapping up our prescribed burn season. We've been burning our fields to keep them open spaces. And we also give, free land management advice to other people. So if you're interested in trying to manage your property to support native plants and animals, get in touch and we have an employee who can come give you some advice. I think that's all I want to say about Clifton. And just to briefly introduce Bert, he's been birding by ear for, I think we can probably say 35 years at this point, so he will be our expert guide for the evening. And he studied ecology and ornithology in both his undergraduate and his graduate degrees, so he's been studying birds professionally for a long time as well. So I think that's all I want to say about Bert, and I'll hand it over and you can share your screen. Oh, sorry, actually, so this is being recorded and we will send out the recording to everyone in a couple of days. And I will be on the call. I tend to jump in and add a couple thoughts, but I will be on the Q&A. So let's try to use the Q&A either with questions for Bert, or if you're having any technical difficulties or if the sound's not coming through or anything like that, use the Q&A and I'll keep an eye on that. I might interrupt Bert as we go, or I might, if there are questions that kind of make more sense for the end, I might save them and then we can go through anything at the end as well. But I'll be in the Q&A if you have any questions or need anything from me.
Right. Can you see that? Okay, so here we go with warblers. Okay, so Eleanor gave an intro. So why warblers? Eleanor, could you turn your audio down a little bit, please? Thanks a lot. So warblers are a little taste of the tropics. So they come and visit every year, and they're really colorful, like other tropical birds. And there's a wide variety of them. We have more than 30 species that come through either in migration or as breeders in our area. And you can see just from this selection some of the impressive diversity of warblers. And no matter how jaded you are as a bird watcher, maybe you've traveled all over the world, people still always get out in the spring to look at these guys. They're also really a really challenging group in terms of songs. They have really complicated songs. They're in the group of of Oscine passerines, so they have complicated syrinxes, and they produce really fast and high-pitched songs that are some of the more challenging bird songs to identify in the New World. So Don't be too hard on yourself if you have trouble learning these. If you do go to the tropics, there's other groups like ant birds and wood creepers and stuff that have much simpler songs that are actually a lot easier to learn. Like I've already alluded to, it's cool to learn about their migration and to think about these tiny birds moving across continents. Um, this is the northern parula, and this is a short distance migrant. So they winter as close as southern Florida and southern Texas, and they come back here for the summer. And they're one of the earlier migrant warblers to show up because they are short distance migrants. In contrast, you have species like blackpoll. This is a really long distance traveler, and you can see that this time of year they're flying up from the wintering range in South America, and they are migrating through our region, or they will be in May, and then they breed in the boreal forest. And then they do this incredible trip in the fall. They launch directly from New England and fly straight to Trinidad, which is really something for a bird of that size. And they reduce a lot of their tissues and turn into butterballs to fuel those flights over the ocean. And luckily, we have eBird to help us learn warblers. And if you look at the bar charts, these bar charts are for the northern counties of Northern Virginia. Hey, Eleanor, could you let the dog inside, please? Susie is unhappy that she is not being part of this workshop. Um, and the bar charts, so the thicker the bars are, the more common the bird is. And so you can see that some species like magnolia, they pass through here only as migrants and they don't breed here. And so you can see they become most common in the second and third weeks of May, and then they're commoner in the fall than they are in the spring. Um, In contrast, we have species like cerulean warbler. That's a breeder here at high elevations, and you can see it's an uncommon or rare bird here in June. So check out the bar charts on eBird. Another cool thing is that our area, we're in the middle, we're sandwiched between the mountains and the coastal plain, and so we have a really impressive range of habitats within our region. So you can go to the high mountains of West Virginia and find breeding mourning warblers, for example. And in our area, we have species like prairie warblers breeding in the Piedmont. And then if you go down to the coastal plain, you can find things like prothonotary. And I have a figure showing some of these. So cerulean, I mentioned, for example, at the Trillium Trail, the highest parts of Fauquier County. Um, and another one is Kentucky. That's one that is a rare breeder in our area, but we do have them in places with well-developed understories. Okay, so now to the song. So I'm going to be talking about migratory warblers and also breeding warblers. And we tried to group them by similarity to make them easier to learn. And we have hard ones and easy ones mixed in. But if you see a one with a yellow star, that's one of the common ones that you probably want to focus on.
Bert, can I say one thing about that?
Yep.
This is something I anyway have to learn every year because some of these birds we're only seeing for a couple weeks in the spring and a couple weeks in the fall. So I always need an annual refresher. So if this is your annual refresher, that's great. But if you're just starting learning, I think we're gonna play 40 songs tonight. It's basically impossible if you're just starting to learn all 40 of those. So I think that's just how it goes. Maybe you'll learn 5 this spring, maybe you'll learn 5 next year, maybe 5 the year after that. You'll forget a few, but it's kind of a lifelong journey. So try not to be overwhelmed with all 40 tonight. And like Bert said, kind of focus on a handful of ones that are either easier songs to pick up or common ones like a common yellowthroat is going to be making racket all summer long. So that's a great one to start practicing on. So try not to get overwhelmed by the amount of songs we're going to throw at you tonight.
Okay, so we start with a bird that's not a warbler. This is a winter wren. And this is just to give you a look at what a spectrogram or a sonogram looks like. And we'll play that. So really amazing song. And this is an example of an Austin passerine that has a really complicated song. Um, and just so you see, so these notes are very close together, so that shows that they're fast, and the ones that are higher up are higher pitched. Okay, so now we will go to the warblers with buzzy songs. So this bird, this is a northern parula. This is a song that is very buzzy and fast, and also it rises in pitch, and then it ends with a single note at the end. And that's an alternate song. They do that as well. Of course, nothing's easy. There's variability. But a fast rising trill, that's northern parula. And that's a common breeder in our area, like around rivers. Next is Blackburnian.
I think it should be two, Bert. Yeah.
So this is similar to Parala, not quite as buzzy, more pure musical tones, and it's higher pitched, especially at the end. The last note is really high and hard for a lot of people to hear. And it's in three parts as well. Yeah, and when they start making sounds like that, you can just give up. I mean, this that sounds just to me just like a Cape May. Sometimes the songs are going to be unidentifiable. So Cape May, Bay-breasted, and Blackburnian, they all make songs like this. So don't worry too much about that. But if you stick, actually the Blackburnians, they usually make this the primary song. So it's three parts, it's rising, and at the end it's really high.
Bert, can I share my mnemonic device?
Yep.
It's I don't think Bert finds this helpful, but I find it helpful, so maybe one of you will. To me, the Blackburnian is saying black, 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 Blackburnian. So if that helps you remember, it goes black, 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 Blackburnian. That's the Blackburnian.
Okay, next is cerulean. I still have the wren up here. So for me, this is another really buzzy one, especially the last note is very buzzy. But it's lower pitch, so it sounds kind of like black-throated blue, but it's fast and buzzy compared to a black-throated blue. And like I said, these breed at high elevations in Shenandoah National Park and in um, Thompson Wildlife Management Area. So fast, buzzy, but low pitched. And then next is black-throated blue, so that makes sense. We will see what that sounds like. So that's a lot of variation. And the first songs, the primary songs, those are pretty high pitched actually compared to how deep they can be. So this is actually higher than a cerulean. So I would call that pretty thin and very buzzy and fast. Next we have black throated green. This gets a star. This is a common breeder um, and is especially common in migration. Z, 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 Z. Yeah, that's the alternative. So Z, 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 Z. This is a very distinctive one. And you can see how buzzy it is as well. And if you're really hardcore, then you're going to be listening for the call notes in the fall. So that's where like a smack sort of call, and that's actually they're really common in the fall, and you with a little bit of practice you can start to hear those call notes. Okay, so that's it for Buzzy. So now we moved on to trills, and we're going to do pine warbler, chipping sparrow, and worm eating. This is pine warbler, fairly low pitched. And that's chipping sparrow. So chipping sparrow is very metallic in comparison and fast and high. Um, And you can find these both in the same habitat. Pine warblers tend to prefer areas with at least a couple of pines. And chipping sparrows you can see anywhere like parking lots. They're good in urban areas. And sometimes chipping sparrows can be slower and more musical, so you can hear that. That's more of a pure tone, not as um, buzzy or metallic. And then that's worm eating. So very similar to chipping sparrow. And sometimes I have trouble telling them apart. There have been several reports on eBird lately where people are using Merlin and Merlin is detecting worm eating warblers, but it's too early in the season. They're not here yet. And so Merlin's making a mistake there. And um, that just shows you that there's still a role for humans and all this. But the habitat is very different. So worm eating is a forest bird. They breed on the ground in forests, so they're in different habitats compared to the urban chipping sparrow. Yeah, that's worm eating, so very thin, almost like an insect. Next, we have a rare one, orange crown, at least around here. And in the West, it's a common bird, but here this is a tough one to find. And with practice, if you're out west, you might be able to learn this song. It's going down, so it's a similar pattern or a similar tone to, for example, a worm eating or a chipping sparrow, but it goes down. So that's orange crowned. Be lucky to find one of those here, especially in the spring. And then we have palm warbler. So this is one of our earliest migrants. I haven't seen one yet, but I bet they're already around. And they don't sing a lot when they're migrating, um, but you more often just see them moving through open areas and they're always bobbing their tail. So this is like a really raspy trill. And they have a very metallic chip note that you can hear on the wintering grounds and also when they migrate through in the fall. So if you hear a raspy trill, especially early in the spring, could be a palm warbler. Okay, unique. I guess this means we could not classify these into classify this species into any other group. So this is Tennessee. It's in a distinctive three parts. There are three different patterns, and it gets faster. So at the end, it's a lot faster than how it starts out. So we get Tennessees every year, especially later, like late May, well, or like mid-May. Um, but it's an uncommon warbler. It's always good to see one around here. But they're almost always heard before they're seen. So that's good. That's a good song to learn.
I don't have a mnemonic for that one exactly, but it helps me remember that Tennessee warblers have three parts of their song because they have three syllables in Tennessee. Just putting that out there.
I like that. Okay, the ping pong ball dropping, that's field sparrow. This is still a common bird in our area, but they're declining really fast across their range. They're found in shrubland habitats, and we have a lot of them breeding at Clifton. That last one's a little bit more difficult. It's in the same habitat as a prairie warbler, and so if you hear something that's getting faster and rising a little bit, but the tone is very different. So this is a pure tone whistle, whereas prairie warblers are really buzzy. So that's the classic ping pong ball field sparrow. Yep, and they're already singing. They've been singing, I guess, now for maybe a couple weeks. Okay, and next is prairie warbler. So yeah, like I said, similar habitat, especially in places with cedar trees. Thin, getting higher, and very buzzy. Yeah, and those last two songs are kind of unusual, and it started out with some pure tone notes, whistles, which would be kind of like a field sparrow, but at the end it's very buzzy. But don't worry too much about that. This is a classic song.
Hey, Bert, before you close this, can I just say something?
Yep.
So there's a question, so I want to add something, but also answer a question. So someone asked the question, noticing that we're only sharing pictures of males, is it generally only males that are singing during migration? And primarily, yes. So it's mostly male warblers, male birds in general that are singing, and they are singing, and it's males that are singing because they're the ones that are trying to attract mates and also trying to defend their territories from other males. So those are the two main functions of all of these songs, trying to attract females and also kind of trying to mark your territory against neighboring males. And prairie warblers, as well as a couple of the other warblers that Bert has already alluded to, some of them have two types of songs. They have different nomenclature and different people call them different things, which makes it a little challenging. But some warblers have a different song for attracting females versus repelling other males. And so in the prairie warbler, it's the buzzier ones that are attracting females, and it's the ones with the purer sounds at the beginning that are meant for warding off other males. So sometimes there are different functions for the variable songs that the warblers are producing.
Okay, next we have high, thin buzzes. I mean, I would say the prairie warbler is pretty high, thin, buzzy, but I guess more of a trill. So this is blue-winged warbler. It's a really gorgeous bird that's found in early successional habitats. Easy. So weird. Because in my head it sounds like it goes down, but it actually doesn't. And so blue-winged is another fairly early passage migrant through our area. So definitely keep your ears out. That's a gorgeous bird, and not very common, but we do get them passing through every year. On a good day in early May, late April. And then golden wing, one of the holy grails. So this is a rare and declining warbler, and part of the reason is because it's being hybridized out of existence by the blue-winged. I still haven't seen one of these in Fauquier County, but we do get a few passing through, and they breed in Highland County and also just over the line into West Virginia. So it's four parts instead of two parts, um, and it's higher pitched compared to the blue-winged. Yeah, and so if you find one of these in our area, you're having a very good day. Okay, next, what we're calling the Carolina Wren group. These are species that have roughly similar songs to Carolina Wrens, and we will start with the common yellowthroat. Witchity witchity witch. And sometimes they get creative and add some variations. Yeah, and this is a species that has a really distinctive contact call. This is a really harsh note that it makes. And if you're walking out in a field during the breeding season, you might hear this call. But the main thing to remember is witchity witchity witch. And I heard one of these yesterday, so they have just arrived. Okay, and then ovenbird, Kentucky, and Carolina wren. These are all pretty similar, so we'll put them in the same track, just like we did with the pine warbler. This is ovenbird. So the main thing to notice about the ovenbird is that it's getting louder as it goes. The Carolina wren doesn't do that. It's pretty much the same volume. This is still ovenbird. Ovenbird. And this is Kentucky warbler. Yeah, and it just takes practice to separate these. They tend to be found in different places. So ovenbirds are found. They both breed in our area. Ovenbirds breed in open woods, especially like drier oak woods. Whereas Kentucky warblers, they like to have a really thick understory. Um, and we have them and tend to be in more richer forests, like mesic forests. And that's the Carolina wren, which you probably already know. So it's more musical, more rollicking compared to the other two. Now on to Wilson's. This is another bird that's really common in the West. It's a beautiful warbler, but rare here. There are a few that pass through every spring, but you're going to be lucky if you see one of these. And I don't think I've ever heard one singing, but that's partially because it's not a very distinctive song, I think. Yeah, it's pretty featureless, I'm afraid. It is in two parts. Yeah, but that last song there, that sounds just like maybe like a yellow rump or something. It's Wilson's is a tough one. And then to mourning, this is another really rare migrant, but you can find them breeding at high elevations in West Virginia. And they have a really distinctive song. Maybe not the last one, but their main song is There's Nothing Else Quite Like the Morning. Do you have a moniker for that one, Eleanor? I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, operatic melody. Louisiana water thrush. So this is our earliest arriving long distance warbler. They do just fine with a couple of frosts. They've been here for a couple weeks now, maybe I don't know, at least yeah, 2 weeks, and they are found near water. So Louisiana water thrushes they breed along rivers and creeks, whereas the northern water thrush breeds around ponds. And we don't have northern breeding here. So if you see a water thrush in June in our area, it's going to be a Louisiana. So it's a cascading song that can be heard above the loud water noise. Pretty distinctive song. And that's the typical one. And this one gets out of hand. And they do that sometimes, especially early in the season. And this is the chip note of the Louisiana water thrush. Fairly distinctive. Also, you only hear it, when you're walking along a creek. So with some practice, you can learn the chip note of the Louisiana. And the chip note of the northern is pretty similar. That takes some practice. But sometimes you hear them in the fall. Yellow-throated warbler is one that has a similar song to Louisiana. It's also in roughly similar habitat, at least in our area. It's found mostly in riparian areas, but they're singing from the tops of the trees, whereas the Louisianas are always down low, close to the water. And yellow-throated warbler is a fairly rare breeder in our area. They do breed along the Rappahannock River and along the Thornton River. So this is a more regular bird song. It's not quite as crazy as the Louisiana water thrush. It's a descending, cascading song like the water thrush. And look and see if it's coming from the treetops or not. Next is Swainson's. This one is really hard to see in Virginia. They do breed in the Dismal Swamp, but if you go down to the southeastern swamps of the U.S. or a few spots in the mountains in North Carolina, you can find them breeding. And they have a similar song, although the habitat is pretty different for them as well. So you're not going to find these other birds breeding in the mountains of North Carolina in the same thickets of rhododendrons. Sioux Sioux Sisterville. And so they're similar, all three of these species have similar songs. And, you're not going to necessarily learn them all tonight. But if you're able to put them in a group and you say, well, I'm near water and this is a cascading song, I bet it's one of these three species. I bet it's a Louisiana water thrush or a yellow-throated warbler or a Swainson's warbler. And then you can pull out your phone these days and play it and check. You can even ask Merlin to try to identify it for you. Okay, to the explosive melodies and to the northern water thrush. Like I said, they don't breed here, but they do migrate through. And we hear them every spring singing. When they're migrating, they are near water though. And so I often when I hear a northern water thrush, I get excited because to me it sounds similar to a Connecticut, and that's one of the another really rare one that we're always listening for. They sound pretty similar. But northern water thrush is a lot more common. And you can see it's in two parts. It's starting out with these double notes and then ends up with single. Fast single notes at the end that sound kind of like a cardinal. So that's northern water thrush. Oh yeah, and Canada is also fairly similar in song to northern water thrush. They look completely different. They also breed at the very highest elevations of Shenandoah. And this is one of my favorite warblers. They're really cool. Very jumbled. The notes are going all over the place. But if you go up to the Limberlost Trail in June and you hear something jumbled, it's probably going to be a Canada warbler. And if you're lucky, you might be able to see it. And they're flying here all the way from the eastern base of the Andes. Pretty amazing. And then to Connecticut. So again, you're really unlikely to hear this, but it's always worth listening. You never know. And they do come through in the fall. It was kind of like the initial notes of the northern water thrush, but it doesn't have a trill at the end. But if you really want to hear one singing, go to northern Minnesota or something in the summer. I still haven't done that one of these days. Okay, full-throated sweet song. So these are back to some common species that have really similar songs, and these are puzzles. It's always a challenge to figure them out. Chestnut-sided, magnolia, and yellow. Please, please, pleased to meet you, is what the chestnut-sided says. Yeah, and if they would always stick to the script and do that first song, it wouldn't be a big deal because nothing else really says please, please, pleased to meet you. But then they often do that, and so that could be any either of those three species, and I hesitate to identify those without seeing them. Yeah, so that could be chestnut-sided, magnolia, or yellow. I wouldn't know in the field, but we know here that this is a chestnut-sided. Obviously, if you get a look at them, they're very different. That helps. And chestnut-sided, I should say, breeds in a few spots in Shenandoah at high elevations and open areas. Okay, magnolia, that's another beauty. It's a rollicking song. Yeah, and that could have been any of them, any of those three, quite similar. But these first two songs are pretty distinctive because that note at the end, it's rollicking, but then there's that one note that goes down at the end. So with practice, that was it took me a while to figure this one out, but the magnolia, if it's doing that classic first song, it can definitely be identified from song. Then we go into yellow warbler. This is a common one, and it breeds in wetlands, sunny wetlands in our area. Like for example, at Sky Meadows. Sweet, sweet, sweeter than sweet. Sweet, sweet, sweeter than sweet. So that's the classic song. And then it gets into making, yeah, and then to me that sounded like please, pleased to meet you. So that's a bummer. Yeah, but it's an abbreviated meet you, it takes practice. But if you have one of these in June, like in a sunny wetland with willows everywhere, it's going to be a yellow warbler breeding down there. Chestnut-sideds are only going to breed at high elevations in our area. And then to Prothonotary, this is a bird of swamps, so this is a common at Huntley Meadows, and also it's a rare breeder along the Rappahannock River. Loud, sweet, 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 sweet. And the habitat's a real clue for this one. They're also found along the Shenandoah River, so riparian areas and swamps. And if you hear a song like that, it's going to be a prothonotary. And that's a really gorgeous one as well. It's a unique yellowish orange color. Then to Nashville, this is an uncommon migrant. We get them every spring, and the song is a little hard to hear, but they definitely come through. So this is a distinctly two-part song. It's almost like a Tennessee that is missing the third part. So it goes down and it goes down at the end. Yeah, that's a pretty distinctive one there. So if you hear something that sounds kind of like that, like it's in two parts and it's going down at the end, check it out and see if it's a Nashville. I always like to check these visually. Difficult and variable and thin. Yep, that's red start. This one should have a yellow star as well. This is a common breeder at high elevations and a really common migrant in the spring and in the fall. But it's a challenge to identify by ear. The birdsong CDs, these are from the Stokes birdsong CDs. I think they start out with the easy ones, not necessarily with the most common ones in terms of the different song variations for each species. So starting out with a very distinctive redstart song. That's a classic redstart song. So high and thin in the beginning, and then it goes down on the final note. And the final note is also really fast. Yep, that one as well. So if you hear a song like that at high elevations in Shenandoah, it's a redstart. But then that could be anything. So a lot of warblers make songs like that. So you can just ignore that. High and thin, but hopefully not as variable. Black and white, this is another very common migrant and breeder at higher elevations. Weesey, 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 like a squeaky wheel. So pretty distinctive. The only problem with this species is that it's really high pitched, and so if you're losing your high pitch hearing, which is eventually going to happen to all of us, then black and white might be a challenge. But they also have their weird monotypic genus. There are no other birds like it in the world. They creep around like a nuthatch, but they're a warbler. And then to Cape May, another high-pitched one. This one is a common migrant through our area. It's really increased with the spruce budworm outbreaks, and we see them a lot migration, but they breed way up in the boreal forest. This is about as high as it gets. So if you just hear very high and thin and simple notes, then it's a Cape May. Um, and they're variable, so it's always nice to see them and make sure it's not a bay-breasted. Cape May really outnumber bay-breasted, but we do get bay-breasteds coming through in the spring and in the fall. And so that's next. Of course, if you see them, they're really different looking in the spring, that is. In the fall, they can be really hard to tell visually. This is another boreal forest bird. The breeder is the bay-breasted. And if you're very lucky, it might be making that rollicking song where it goes up and down, fast up and down. But in practice, they don't sound like that very often. It's more often that. And if you hear something like that, that could easily be a Cape May or a bay-breasted, and I really struggle with those. Very high and diffuse. This one is a little better, so this one is a little bit rollicking going up and down, but difficult. And it's very high, so this will be a challenge for some people to hear. Then we get to Blackpoll. This is a really common warbler that comes through at the end of the migration. So when migration is really winding down, the Blackpolls are all coming through. I guess it takes them a while to get up here from South America. Also very high, but distinctive. So this one is pretty easy to identify compared to like Cape May and Bay Breasted. Very fast, high and fast. And it has a ringing quality. It's really pretty loud, actually. That's Blackpool. Okay, and we're almost done here. Then we come next to the difficult and variable warble, and that's yellow-rumped. So it's kind of unfortunate. So yellow-rumped is probably our most common migratory warbler, and they also come through, they start quite early. So right now there's a lot of yellow-rumps coming through, and they're singing every morning. And unfortunately, they have really variable songs that are not very distinctive. Sometimes they go down at the end like that, which is nice, although it could be confused with Nashville. But that's a pretty typical nondescript song of a yellow-rumped. So the good thing about yellow-rumped is that right now there's not much else coming through in terms of warblers. So if you're hearing songs, it's a good time now to practice with yellow-rumped. Unique, the hooded warbler, weeda weeda weedio. So that's really distinctive. There's nothing else like that. And sometimes they do this, which is a variation sort of on the theme. So hooded warblers, they breed in our area. Also, they have distinctive metallic chip notes. So this is one of the easier chip notes to learn. And since they're a breeder, there are opportunities to practice with the chip note of the hooded warbler. And you know, like in July, when they're really kind of winding down on the breeding, they're not going to be singing much, but they're going to be making those metallic chip notes in Shenandoah. And then we finish with the yellow-breasted chat, which I don't think is currently considered a warbler. I haven't checked on the latest taxonomy on the chat, but it has been grouped with warblers. And even though it sounds more like a mimid, like it's in the family with mockingbirds and thrashers. So they're a lot of fun. So chats are great. Um, they don't really sound quite like anything else, although, like I said, they're kind of similar to a mimid. And they're also found in the same habitat as a thrasher, so they're found in shrublands. Um, but usually you can get a look at them and see who's singing in there. Okay, so hopefully you remembered all of those birds. But you know, when I started, we had, you know, recordings on cassette tapes, and it was pretty hard to get to the bird you wanted to listen to. So really, we've come a long way just by having iPods. That was a big deal when you could, you know, look at all the songs on the iPod and call up what you wanted, or at least scroll to it pretty quickly. And now that when then we got to phones, and you can actually search for the species. And finally, Merlin has really, it's really revolutionary. Definitely imperfect, has a ways to go, and you want to use it with caution, but it really helps. Um, and if you know, if you're learning and you're using Merlin and you're submitting eBird checklists, if it's flagged as rare on eBird, that probably means that Merlin is wrong. So just keep that in mind. And add some notes. If you think you found a rare bird, you know, if it's early or late, add details that helps people decide if it was really that species or not. But the best way to learn is not with a computer telling you what you're hearing. The best way is to come out with folks who know what they're hearing. And so we have bird walks twice a month at Clifton. The Virginia Bird Club leads really frequent walks all over Northern Virginia, which is really helpful. So I definitely recommend going out on bird walks. The Sibley app is still useful, as well as Merlin. We use the Stoke CDs here. That's really kind of obsolete at this point. Um, Voice Record Pro, that's the app that I use on my phone to record WAV files. Those are uncompressed audio files. So you can make, you're not going to make incredible recordings with a phone, but if you want to make the best recordings you can, then you want to use WAV file. WAV is your format, and you can use that free app to do it. You can also post your observations on iNaturalist, and folks can help you identify species on there. Like I'm showing an example here of a chestnut warbler, a chestnut-sided warbler contact call that I recorded. And in this talk, I've been using Audacity, which is free software that enables you to look at the sonograms, which is helpful, especially when you're learning. So to conclude, I already mentioned that tropical birds are actually easier to learn. The songs of tropical birds are easier to learn than warblers, so don't get discouraged. It is difficult to learn these warbler songs. And like with any kind of bird watching, you want to narrow it down. So you want to think about what time of year it is, even down to the week. If you look at those bar charts on eBird, it can make a difference if it's the second or the third week of April in terms of the likelihood of some of the warblers or other species that are migrating thruh. So use the time of year, the habitat, including the microhabitat, like is it on the ground, is it in the treetops? That's like for Louisiana wathrush versus yellow-throated warbler, which are both found in riparian habitats. Make recordings. It's fun and useful to help you identify them. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, everyone. I don't see any open questions, but if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. I don't think with the webinar I can have anyone speak their questions, but we're happy to answer any typed questions there.
Maybe it's all perfectly clear. It's the greatest warbler song talk that's ever been given. Okay, let's see here. Okay. Do we know if the birds ever get confused about which species they're hearing? Um, you know, that's a really good question. Sometimes if you do a playback, you play the song of one bird, you have another species that will respond. Um, so I don't know if that's confusion or if it's just being eager. Um,
Can I tell an
what do you have to
anecdote?
say to that, Eleanor?
Yeah, I was doing just brushing up today and I found a paper, I think it was from upstate New York. It was somewhere New Englandish. And they were reporting a prairie warbler that learned a field sparrow song, which is crazy to me because, we put them in similar group. They kind of sound similar, but it's a really different quality of sound. So I was kind of amazed to, I would think that their syrinx would just be like built to make a buzzy sound, but no, apparently, I mean, unfortunately, there were no recordings with a paper, but I think that was crazy. So they at least seem to be able to get confused about whose song to learn.
Well, we saw that one time in North Carolina. We got really excited because we were hearing a cerulean warbler singing, and we had never seen one on that mountain before. And we got up and took a look at it, and it was a black-throated blue that was singing a cerulean song. And so presumably, in that situation, it was a cerulean male who was singing near the nest of the black-throated blue, I guess. Okay, well, thank you all very much, and we'll put up the recording, and then we'll do it again next year as well. So get out there and see some warblers and put your stuff on eBird.